Hi everyone, and welcome to the Virginia Cooperative Extension Plant Clinic. These plant clinics are sponsored by the Virginia Cooperative Extension Program of Virginia's two land-grant universities, Virginia Tech and Virginia State University. Staffing our plant clinics are Master Gardeners from two organizations, the Fairfax County Master Gardeners and the Green Springs Master Gardeners. Master Gardeners share science-based information about gardening and horticulture topics. I'm Caitlin McKeegan, and I'll be your moderator for tonight. I'm joined by Extension Master Gardeners Terry McLean, Carolyn Wyblood, Pat Rosend, and Carlotta Mulder. Susan McCracken is serving as our alternate host for this evening. Tonight is all about maples. We are going to start with Terry describing how we identify the different maples, and then Carolyn will focus on the red maple while Pat tells us about silver maples. Then we're going to address any questions that you might have. If during the presentation you think of a question, just put it in the chat box, and Carlotta will be monitoring these to present to our speakers at the end of each of their presentations, as well as during our general conversation time. Terry, I'm really excited to learn how to tell one maple tree from another. It's something that's challenging for me. So if you could give us all a lesson, I would really appreciate it. I'm sure our spectators would too.
Okay. Thank you, Caitlin. My name is Terry McLean, and I'm going to be talking tonight about ways to distinguish between some of the maple species that we find in our area that are commonly confused. Next slide. Okay. So some information about maple trees in general. Their genus is Acer, meaning sharp, probably because of the edges of the leaves. And there are over 130 species worldwide, but most of them are found in Asia, and we only have about 12 or 13, depending on how you count them, that are native to North America. And so the discussion that I'm going to be leading tonight is going to be talking about distinguishing between red maple, sugar maple, silver maple, and Norway maple. All maples are deciduous, meaning they're not evergreen. They lose their leaves. They have opposite leaves, simple leaves, meaning they're not compound, except for one type called box elder, which you can see in this little picture, the second over in the middle row. But other than that, they're all simple leaves. And palmate, meaning that all of the veins, many veins actually, radiate from one central point, and the veins are pretty prominent and visible. And leaves almost always have either 3 or 5 lobes, and a few unusual ones there are 7. The buds that flower in the spring are in little clusters of small droopy flowers usually, and the samaras, or the seeds, are what some people call helicopters or whirlybirds or whirligigs, I've also heard. And those incidentally are edible. The seed part, you can peel open the wing part and get just the little nut inside the seed, and it's edible and actually pretty tasty. Maples prefer full sun. They grow better and faster and taller in full sun, but they will also tolerate part shade. And all of the native maples provide food and habitat for wildlife. And yes, squirrels and birds both love the seeds as well. So ways that you differentiate, the main way is by looking at the leaves, but their shape, their size, their color, the number of lobes, whether the margins are smooth or serrated, and the depth of the indentations or sinuses between those lobes. Different types have very deep indentations or shallow. But you can also, if you're not able to determine, you can also check the bark, what color it is, how smooth it is, or if it's rough and with fissures in it. And also the color and size and shape of the flowers and buds before they totally open into flowers, and the samaras. Next. So the first type of maple we'll discuss, red maple or Acer rubrum. Rubrum means red in Latin, and it's called that because year-round, some part of the tree is red on most of these red maples. Either the leaves because it's fall time, or the samaras because it's spring, or the flowers because it's very early spring or late winter. Or if none of those, then the leaf stems are usually red. This is the most abundant type of tree species in North America. That was something I never knew. It's also known as rock maple or hard maple, and that is referring to the wood. The wood is very durable and hard and good for building things. This is one of our native maples. And there are two types of maples that are most commonly found in our area. One is the red maple, and the other we'll be talking about next is the sugar maple. And red maples tend to be a little shorter than other maples. Their roots are shallow, which means sometimes they actually stick up out of the surface of the ground, which makes it hard to grow grass underneath that, and the fact that it's very shady under there. And the leaves usually have 3 lobes, like the red one pictured here, but they can have a total of 5 lobes, with the last 2 at the bottom edge on the left and the right being very small, like they are in this green photo. The leaves are a lightish green, and if you flip over the green leaf, it will have a very light colored underside. And the margins are serrated but irregularly, not toothed evenly all around, and they usually are red in the fall. And as I said before, the samaras and leaf stems are also usually red. Next. So the sugar maple, Acer saccharum. Saccharum means sugar in Latin. It's also known as hard maple because the wood is hard, or rock maple. It's also known as sugar tree or sweet maple because the sap is quite sweet and is the sweetest sap of all the different types of maples. And that's actually why it is used most commonly, the one used to make maple syrup. Although you can use other types of maples to make syrup. I never knew that. It just makes a lower quality syrup. The wood, again, is strong and durable, good for building furniture and things like that. It's one of our natives. It's the other one that's most commonly found in our area. It's been on the national flag of Canada since 1965. They are well known for their maple syrup production. And so that's why they chose the sugar maple to put on their flag. The sugar maple is one of the brightest colored trees in all of the trees during the fall. And that's why New England's fall is so spectacular, because they have a large percentage of sugar maples in their forests in that area. The leaves are dark green with smooth margins. Again, 5 lobes, but 3 are large and 2 are just tiny little lobes on the sides. And they can be red, yellow, or orange, or a combination of the 3. All 3 colors can be on the same tree in the fall. Next. The next type of maple we're going to talk about is the silver maple, Acer saccharinum, meaning not sugar, but like sugar, because they are pretty similar to, looks-wise, they are similar to sugar maple. It's also called silverleaf maple, and that name and silver maple and white maple are all because of the color of the underside of the leaves. If you look at the photo, you'll see that the underside is almost white, very different color than the top side of the leaves. And soft maple, because again the wood is soft. Creek maple and water maple, because they are frequently grown or do well near water. They are 5-lobed leaves, and they usually turn yellow in the fall. Silver maples can be a bit of a problem because they produce a lot of the samaras, and they end up clogging gutters. They get all over your deck or your sidewalk or your porch or whatever you have anywhere near the tree. The branches tend to break off, small twigs all over your yard, and the larger branches sometimes break, which can actually be dangerous if your house is nearby. And if I sound a little annoyed as I'm saying this, it's because I have one of these in my yard, and yes, it is annoying. The bark and twigs release a rank odor when crushed, which is the only type of maple that does that of our natives. So that actually is a good clue to use when you're trying to determine if something is a silver maple. Next. So the Norway maple, I'm also discussing, even though it's not one of our natives, because it is very frequently confused with the other maples, especially sugar maple. It's Acer platanoides, and that means that it's like the plane tree because it's similar. If you look at a plane tree, it's similar looking leaves. It was introduced to North America. It was from Europe, obviously, Norway, and it was introduced in the mid-1700s as a shade tree. And it was very popularly used as a street tree in the 60s and 70s, and now has become invasive in our area because it's such a hardy tree. And when the leaf stems are broken, a milky sap is released, and that's the only maple tree that does that of our natives. So that's another good way to determine if it's a Norway. Next. So a dichotomous key for maples. Dichotomous key, in case you're unfamiliar with this, is when you're trying to figure out what species a plant is, and you have a sample of it in front of you, and you ask yourself, is it this or is it that? And if it's one, you go in this direction, and if it's that, you go in this direction and follow the next question. So if your leaves have smooth margins, there's 5 lobes, you look at the tree bark and it has deep furrows and narrow ridges if it's a mature tree, and the samara, the double winged seeds, are wide spreading, meaning the angle is wide. Instead of them being close together as they hang, they open widely. Then it's probably a sugar maple. But if you look at the toothed or serrated margins, if they are toothed or serrated margins on the leaves, or if the narrow angled, the fruit wings have narrow angles, then it's not going to be sugar maple, and you go on to the next slide for the next question. To answer a question that came into the chat, Norway maples are considered invasive because they have become so comfortable here that they are spreading, and they are growing in the way invasive plants do, where we don't want them, and crowding out other species. So now, if we had a leaf that had serrated edges or toothed edges, now we're going to decide, does it have 5 deeply indented lobes or 3 broad lobes, sometimes with maybe 2 small lobes? Does it have narrow sinuses, meaning the spaces in between those lobes are long and thin, or are they broad and shallow? If you can look at the bark, if you have the tree in front of you, is the bark not very deeply furrowed, or is it deeply furrowed, like we said earlier? And if the leaves have serrated edges and the fruit wings are narrow angled, then it's probably a red maple. If it's 5 deeply indented lobes and bark not deeply furrowed and usually planted not wild, then next, it's probably a silver maple if when you crush the twigs or bark, it releases a rank odor. Or if it doesn't release a rank odor, but it has either 5 or 7 lobes and the leaf stems produce a milky sap when you break them, then you're probably looking at a Norway maple. Next. So, do those look tricky? I think they do. And still, after doing all this research, when I'm out for a walk and I see a tree, sometimes I have to think, okay, which one will this be? And apparently we are not alone, because in 2013, when Canada came out with their new, newly designed $20 bill, some sharp-eyed tree specialists were very annoyed when they realized that the leaf that you can see there on the $20 bill is not a sugar maple leaf. It is a Norway maple leaf. So somebody screwed up. So it must be a common error to make. Next. All right, quiz time. Let's see what you can do. Next. Okay, so think about how many lobes there are, whether the edges of the leaf are serrated or if they are smooth. How deep are the indentations? The color of the leaf. Okay, next. If you guessed that that was a Norway maple, you were correct. Next. Okay, now we have leaves that we have it in the fall color of both yellow and red. That's a hint. The stems are red. It has 3 lobes. The edges look like they are irregularly serrated, maybe, but slightly only. Next. Did you guess red maple? If so, you are correct. Next. Okay, here we have one that has 3 large lobes and 2 small lobes there at the base, one on the left and one on the right. The sinuses or indentations between the lobes are a little more long and narrow than what we saw before. The edges do not appear to be serrated. Next. That one is a sugar maple. Next. And the last one, this one, the indentations are even deeper. Looks like 5 lobes, definitely serrated or toothed edges here. And it's a bright green. Next. That one is our silver maple. Next. Okay, I used quite a few sources, but these were the main ones I used. And yes, okay, those are it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Terry. That was incredibly enlightening. I loved the quiz. I think that will help all of us be a little bit more skilled at identifying maples when we're out for our walks. Carlotta, were there any questions in the chat for Terry?
There were, but Terry was following that as well, so she chimed in and answered that question. So there's nothing else there right now.
That's wonderful. And again, if anyone has any questions, just put them in the chat box and we'll address those at any time during our presentation. All right, so Carolyn, that was a great overview we got from Terry. I am looking forward to you diving in a little bit deeper on red maple. So take it away.
Okay, she covered some of the things that I'm going to cover, of course, but I'm going to speak on the red maple or Acer rubrum. And as you can see, it has many common names, the soft maple, the Carolina maple, on down. It's a native deciduous tree that may grow 120 feet tall with a 6-foot diameter trunk, but it's commonly 40 to 70 feet high and 2 or 3 feet across. And it grows in zones 3 through 9. A very fast growing tree, 1 to 2 feet a year, and very cold hardy tree. You need to have a large yard to handle one, and you don't want to plant it too close to the driveway or sidewalks, as it does have a shallow root system that could buckle them. It's tolerant of a wide range of soils, including clay, but prefers moist, slightly acid conditions and full sun to part shade. Next slide. This maple's leaves are smaller than the other maple varieties, and they have a rough saw edge, almost serrated. The red maple is known for its color. New leaves are red tinged, turning to green. And in the fall, it's one of the first trees to display a spectacular kaleidoscope of deep red to orange to yellow leaves. You can see the variations here a little bit. And the green stems turn red in the winter. Next slide. The bark of a young tree is silvery gray, becoming scaly and dark with age. And you can see how this one is getting a very rough look to it. The sap contains sugar that can be used as a drink or concentrate into syrup or sweet foods. But it only yields about half the quantity of syrup obtained from the sugar maple. Next. The colorful buds you see here are the red stems. And one of the things that they say about the red maple is there's always a part of it that's red at any given time. Next. The tree produces clusters of small red or yellow flowers in late winter to early spring before the leaves appear. There are male flowers that produce pollen and female flowers that produce the fruit or seeds. You can see those on these pictures. Flower nectar attracts bees and other pollinators, or sometimes the tree can be pollinated by the wind. Next. The fruit, during the spring, the light brown or red-winged sumaras or fruits mature. They are flying 1-inch twin seeds bound by their tips to long drooping stems like V-wings. You can see them here. They're commonly called helicopters or whirlybirds, and they are beloved by the gray squirrels and many birds. I can tell you, I see what's left when the squirrels get that little seed. You can see the little seed in there all over my patio. So they really love them. Next. This tree is the best choice for a soft maple. It makes an excellent lawn, park, or street tree. Well, the most common problem is the fungal leaf spot. And that really doesn't injure the tree much. It just kind of spots up the leaves, and then next year they come out again, just regularly looking without any spots. But the most severe problem is Versilium Wilt, which is a soil-based fungus that moves through the tree's vascular system and produces toxins. And it can often be fatal to the tree. The tree has some tolerance for air pollution. The light-colored wood, commonly known as soft maple, is heavy but weak and used for pulpwood and some furniture, but it's not for as nice a furniture as the other maples that are much harder. The red maple has the greatest north-south range of any tree species living entirely in the eastern forests, and it's the state tree of Rhode Island. That's it. There's the resources.
Well, thank you, Carolyn. That's really helpful. And those were really great pictures that will help aid our identification if we see red maples on our walls. Are there
Carolyn, Terry wants to know, do all red maples have both male and female flowers?
I don't think so. No, some are male and some are female.
All the questions we have.
Thanks, Carlotta. We are going to go, sorry, I missed a slide there. So next up, Pat is going to give us an overview of silver maples, the good, the bad, and the not so bad. So I'm looking forward to hearing this. Take it away, Pat.
Okay, well, after learning about all the maples, and the silver maple is, it has a reputation, and we might try to see if we can't do something about improving that reputation tonight. Next slide. The silver maple, it's a native, it's a very large shade tree. As mentioned before, it gets its common name from the underside of the leaves, which is a very dramatic silver color. It's particularly noticeable in a wind. You can see the leaves moving and changing, and it's quite lovely. It is native to eastern North America, but it grows actually all through the Midwest, even into the Kansas and the heart of the Midwest. It is tolerant of wet soils, and it is found in floodplains, along streams, rivers, bogs, that kind of area where you can get standing water. It is, as mentioned, a very fast-growing tree. It does have a graceful form in the right location, and it was a very popular tree when particularly East Coast cities were in a development phase after World War II, and many were planted in these housing developments that went up in empty areas that didn't have any greenery. Silver maple was an answer to that. They grew in fast, the homeowner would get some nice trees, neighborhoods would grow in. And areas like the Washington metro area subsequently have a lot of them concentrated in urban areas where they might not otherwise have been planted or grown on their own. Next slide. So what's good about a silver maple? It's a fast grower, as we mentioned. A lot of times, you know, that is a desirable trait. It's easy to plant and grow, and it's hard to kill, as many of you who might have experience with one you prefer wasn't growing in a certain place. No, it is good on soils that need improvement, poor soils, especially clays, wet soils, and where other plants just won't cut it. It is a very attractive tree in a large space. When it has room to grow, you get a beautiful canopy. It has a large, delicate leaf. As we've seen, the leaves are, you know, like a palm with very long fingers, like a piano player. And then in the right location, it's quite a lovely tree. Again, its fast growth will give good reward in a short amount of time. It can also be used in areas to be reforested, or if you need a fast windbreak. That was used a lot in the Midwest, in the plains areas where they had no trees of any size, and they planted a lot of silver maples, and when they grew in, it made land farmable. It made, you know, it reduced the impact of the strong winds that come out of Canada, I think. Okay, next slide. But they do have a few bad characteristics that people are familiar with. Because they are fast growing, and the rule of thumb is if it's any tree that's fast growing is weak timber, because they don't have, the slower the tree, they build, you know, on over a long period of time, they build their strength. So a tree that grows tall and fast just doesn't have that strength in the trunk. They also, because they're brittle and they grow fast, they have long branches which break, and they're definitely susceptible to high winds. And in this area, snow and ice, especially ice storms, are particularly damaging to a silver maple. They have extremely shallow roots. It's good in in a poor soil condition, but it's maybe not desirable in a neighborhood or in an urban situation where you have lots of things around it that can be damaged or impacted by shallow roots. And they're not slightly shallow, they are quite significantly large, roots on the top. They are, as mentioned previously, a prolific seeder. It is a shower, it is a deluge of seeds in the spring when they come out. It can cause a negative impact on a homeowner. Again, it will cover your yard. It will clog anything that you have out there, and it will it'll reseed. They're easily seed. They do provide good food for the local wildlife. Silver maple does not have the ability to resist and compartmentalize decay, which is another issue contributing to brittle and weak trunks. So if they get a wound on the trunk, that's going to cause a problem in a short period of time, rather than a slow growing tree, which will have a chance to overgrow that wound and heal and compensate and continue to grow. So that way you could even get split at the trunk, not just the branches. Okay, next slide. Okay, so what's not so bad about this tree? Well, if you have wet soils or poor soils and you'd like to get something growing on there, this is an excellent suggestion. This tree would be a good fit. Additionally, it can be a classic understory tree, a classic first growth, where if you're trying to rehabilitate an area, you first put in some fast growing trees that will allow the slower growing trees to grow up underneath their canopy. Once that canopy is established, it's a much more desirable environment for the slower growing trees, oaks, different kinds of maples that can grow in and start to reforest or rehabilitate a poor or disturbed area. They are very attractive in big open spaces. If you have a few acres, definitely a few of these would make a really nice specimen. You put them off so they can be far from structures or where they might have a negative impact. You know, gardeners always say there's no wrong plant, just a wrong location. So this is not a bad tree, but it's a lot of time people see it in a bad location, and next to homes is a bad location for this tree. It just doesn't fit any of its desirable characteristics. It's a beautiful fall color, just like any of the maples. It'll give a spectacular color. I think it's quite dramatic because the leaves themselves are dramatic, and it can give you a broad mix of color. Again, reforestation or large open spaces. Some breeders have been trying to, blend or crossbreed some of these silver maples with some other maples to make it more suitable in urban areas. I'm not sure it will ever work, but there are some. So the Blair is one hybrid that is said to have stronger branching, because again, if you have fast growing branching with shallow notches, right, then those are very susceptible to sudden breaks. So they're working on that. Let's see here. Celebration and Autumn Blaze are red and silver maple cross. Again, they have fall color, and I think it's always nice to try new varieties. I would have to say that none of these suggestions talk about some of the other issues, primarily the heavy shallow root systems. And so I might still keep them away from structures. That is probably going to be an issue under most circumstances. So next slide. What do I have next? They are susceptible to diseases and pests. They can, and again, they're not great at fending off diseases So diseases that can affect the silver maple are tar spot. That's the picture that's shown on there. They can get wilt, as was previously discussed, sooty mold. They are also susceptible to a number of insects that can cause damage, scale, aphids, in addition to general cold weather damage that they can get. So they do have some, if you look at maples across the board, they are quite nice landscape trees, specimen trees, and forest, wilderness trees. This tree is not the best solution in your yard, but it might be the best solution in your property. So think of it that way. How big is your property and what goal are you trying to achieve? Next slide. So there are a number of resources for this particular variety because, again, it's a native plant. It's one of the highly planted during certain eras of development in America. In addition, it spreads and it was carried out west by many migrating citizens, moving out to the west. And so you'll find everybody has a opinion about silver maples, and mine is it's worth giving it a try because of its beauty and its opportunity, but make sure you have enough room. And that's all I have today.
Thank you, Pat. I think that was a really great and honest estimation of silver maples and what you should think about before maybe planting one in your yard or your property, as you said. Carlotta, are there any questions for Pat?
No, there are none in the chat.
Excellent. So we do have some, at least one question from our registered guests today, and so I'm happy to go to that. This question came from Catherine and is specific to maples. What is the impact of the spotted lanternfly, which we might have heard of as an invasive problem insect? What impact do these insects have on maple trees? And Carolyn, I think you were going to get us started, but the other presenters, please jump in and add.
Right, I did some research on that, and there's really no knowledge that they actually kill the tree. They're heavy feeding. If there's a lot of them, it can weaken the maple and cause loss of leaves and make the tree susceptible to other problems such as root bugs. They have about the best thing that they're saying if you really have an infestation is to have an arborist come and apply a systemic insecticide that kills all the insects that feed on the root. It's better than just spraying. Another alternative is to put a 2-inch strip about 4 feet off the ground of a sticky tape, and that will cause the flies to fall. They can't cross that, so it would cause them to fall off, and then they can't get back up. What you can do if they're above that, it said, is squirt it off real good, and then you have this tape on there, and supposedly they can't crawl up. That was one idea. That's it. But it's not terribly dangerous.
That's good to know. And I like the tape option as a starting point. But if you have a more systemic infestation, which hopefully none of us do because spotted lanternflies are big problems, but reach out to an arborist if that's the case.
Right. It's best, they say, if you really want to take care of the problem.
Carlotta, do we have any other questions from our guests tonight?
No, nothing else is in the chat.
I just had one observation. Terry, can you confirm this? I didn't know that box elders are in the maple family. Is that true?
Yes, so there is a tree called the box elder maple, and it has, sorry, I'm trying to turn on my video. It has compound leaves. So the leaves look totally different than the other maples that I discussed, and that's why I didn't discuss it, because it's not as easily confused. And box elder bugs prefer the box elder maple tree, which makes sense. And there was something else about box elders. They also have soft wood, and also the leaves look something like elderberry plants, which is, I guess, why they call it box elder.
That is so interesting. I had never put those, I didn't realize it was in the maple family. And now that you say that, I'm like, oh, it does kind of look like my elderberry. It's really cool. Well, thank you, everyone. If there are no other questions, we'll move on, but you guys did an excellent job. This has been really informative, and I think all of us are better equipped to identify the maples in our neighborhoods.